Hi, welcome back to Energy Works. This is Blaine. I'm with Lauren, and it is springtime. And it's springtime at the time that we're recording this, and it will go up and it will probably still be spring depending on where you live when you are watching this, if you watch it near the time that it is posted, which is the point of this discussion is transition times in the weather, transition times in, we'll just say, a country, transition times in your life, be it empty nesting or death or divorce or changing jobs or graduating from college and starting a career or moving to a new home or a new state or a new country, the times that we're transitioning from one thing to another. And this topic came up because I am studying five element theory with some new to me teachers of Chinese medicine. And I learned five element theory from Donna Eden and from her school and her books. And really, I should say Lauren. I learned it from Lauren Walker. Let me back up and correct what I just said. I learned it from Lauren Walker, who maybe Lauren can say where she first learned it from, but I think Lauren, when she taught it to me, was kind of through the lens of Eden energy medicine. And then I went on to study with Donna on my own and some of Donna's teachers and that sort of thing. But China is 5,000 years old, and Chinese medicine is, as far as written records, is over 2,000 years old. And I have been doing some solo podcast episodes, some of you may have listened to, about food energetics, which comes from, it's also called Chinese dietary therapy. And it is from the way that over 2,000 years ago in China, similar to Ayurveda, the saints and the sages studied nature. And it was very known that we are part of nature. We didn't consider ourselves way back then, we humans, separate from nature, or that there's nature outside our window and then there's us inside our house, and those are two different entities. The people, the humans, were nature. And so the observation of nature led to what we call the five elements, and then also the use of what we consume in our body and the properties of food in ways that we balance our elements. And over all of these thousands of years in China, there's been a lot of teachers, there's been a lot of history. I am not a Chinese history student or professor. I haven't had that kind of teachings, but there have been different leaders in China who wanted the propagation of knowledge of Chinese medicine and five element theory to be delivered in different ways. And then time happens and nothing is ever static. And so via whatever teacher or scholar or book or class, there are definitely different I'll say flavors, not to be too punny. If you listen to my solo episodes about food, I have a lot of food puns in there, I say. And so, different flavors of Chinese medicine. And so I learned it one way via Lauren, via Donna Eden, but now it's coming at me with some different perspectives. And one of them is about the earth element. And I just want to let Lauren talk because I've been talking for like 4 minutes here. And maybe you want to clarify, Lauren, kind of how you came into five element theory. And then we can dive into new to me revelations about Earth.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So, yes, I did have my introduction to Chinese medicine and five element theory through Donna Eden and through her school. And from there, I've branched out as I do, as you do, seeking other teachers, other perspectives. And it's a 5,000-year-old tradition, and so you would imagine that there are a lot of interpretations and different interpretations of very even similar topics. And what I found so fascinating about it is, one of the things that's so beautiful about five element theory is that you can really be very specific about things and about understanding yourself, all of your health and mental, spiritual, physical challenges, or just, thumbprint through that lens. But you also see how very many different perspectives there are, which makes me see the value of the individual information that you glean from it. In other words, you can look at all of the blueprints, but you can't just say this book has the answer, or this text, or this teacher, because it really is so individual. And what I love is that if you can study, the wider your studies go, the more information that you can have, that you can winnow down into then your very specific solutions for the very specific problems that you're working with. So it's a huge body of knowledge, and it really it allows you to get very specific within that. I hope that wasn't too confusing, but it can be confusing, right? Because each of the traditions, many of them start the wheel in a totally different element, which then makes everything that you thought you knew totally different. And so I think you're going to share with us a little bit today about just that.
Yes. Yeah. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yes. Yes.
Hold your things, everything lightly, even though it is thousands of years old. And so talking about Earth, so the way that I was first introduced to 5-element theory, there are 5 elements, and you can think of them, we call it the flow cycle, and you can think of it as a circle. Water flows into wood, wood flows into fire, fire flows into earth, earth flows into metal, metal flows into water. And so it's just kind of this endless circle. And that is how I learned it. And then but I also learned that a long time ago, Earth was what we call in the middle. And so if you can imagine a graph with Earth in the very center, and then there's a circle going around Earth that is water and wood and fire and metal. So it's water, wood, fire, metal, wire, wood, fire, metal that are going in a circle around Earth. And Earth is just always there. Earth is like the fulcrum, or something, like the tether in the middle that is always happening. And that's a different diagram.
And I knew that this diagram with that 4 around the 1, the 4 directions, right? And that's often how people sort of visualize it and look at it, instead of 5 dots around a center wheel. That it's sort of like the cross, right? There's the center, which would have Earth in it, and then the 4 directions, one on above, below, and either side.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for saying that, because that is exactly right. So that is another another school of thought, and they're both very prominent in the thousands of years. You absolutely see them both ways. We just did it the not Earth in the middle way with Eden Energy Medicine. And so when I started studying with these other teachers, they do teach it the Earth is in the middle way. And so Earth is kind of all the seasons. It doesn't matter that, the direction or the season or whatever. Earth is always happening. But it's still, when we think about the seasons, even in this model where Earth is in the middle, it's still the transition times. And so the solstices and the equinoxes are still the prominent time in the 4 seasons in a 365-day year that we have, that Earth is most prominent. And the key there is transition times. And so it's not just the day of the solstice, plus or minus 7 days on each side, or the day of the equinox, plus or minus 7 days on each side. Because if you are in Maine versus Florida versus Arizona versus Illinois, when you're feeling these transition, when the weather feels like a lot of transition is happening, when it's freezing one day and hot the next day and windy and hailing the next day, and and we have these times of spring where we can really feel the transition, it doesn't matter the date on the calendar. What matters is what you see when you look out the window, what you see when you walk outside. That's so if you're in a transition time, if your neighborhood is in a transition time of weather, regardless of it's that day of the solstice or equinox, you are in Earth time. And Earth in the middle, the meridians and the organs of Earth are stomach and spleen. And every time you eat a meal, you are using stomach and spleen as part of your eating and digesting process. And so many times a day, you're in Earth time. You're really using this Earth energy. And so transition times in just the act of consuming food, which is a daily thing, is the lens with which they look at Earth being in the middle, among other things. But those are the really obvious ones. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm just listening. This is fascinating. I'm loving this because the methodology that I learned with Earth in the Middle was not based on this, right? It was more like the heart-centered, sort of the Sarah Allen piece, which we'll maybe get into or not. But this is fascinating. So just, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So it's spring, which is how we started this episode, by me saying it's spring, and that's really why Lauren and I are here talking about this topic. It's interesting just because I've been studying it under a different lens than the way that I've previously studied it. But also, at the time that you are listening or watching this episode, you might be out your window, might be a transition time. And the transition times are ungrounding. Whether it's transition in your weather, transition in your life, transition in your country, all the things that I mentioned before, all the ways that we can have transition, maybe transition in your health, maybe transition, women go through this big transition that can be pretty impactful. And so, you just had a baby, there's many transitions that can happen to us. And so in these teachings that I've been studying recently, that's Earth time. So Earth time is happening very frequently. And what we want to do is ground, because we feel very ungrounded, unstable, unsure about our footing. Tomorrow, who knows what tomorrow is going to bring, because this is a new kind of situation we're in that maybe we haven't had to navigate before. Or Lauren was saying a couple of days ago before us recording, it was really warm and nice, and now it's dumping snow. And at this moment right now, I look out my window, it's very warm and nice. I know in 2 days, we're going to get a ton of snow. The high is 30 and the low is 28. So the whole day is only going to have a 2-degree switch, where I think when I arrived here at the office a little bit ago, it was 78 degrees and sunny outside. And so things feel very kind of untethered. And so there are many ways in which we ground. And I'll start with the breath, because that is just one of the best tools that we have. And we're not going to get into all the types of breath work that you can do. If you're someone who's listening to Energy Works, you probably have a favorite breath work. Lauren?
I want to jump in before you give us techniques to ground. I want to just say one other thing about that transition time, and that the ungroundedness and the uncertainty, that it can feel destabilizing. And there is also another lens to look at it through, because transitions are right. The only change is the only constant is change, right? So transitions are happening all of the time, and if we're attached to things the way they are, we are inviting suffering in. Things are going to change. That is the nature of energy. It is constantly moving and constantly changing. And I remember from reading in Dan and Perry, if anyone has ever read his work, Warrior of the Heart, it's a beautiful book. And there's this whole section around change and transition. And he talks about being on a trapeze, and that if you're flying through the air and there's the other trapeze coming towards you, you have to let go of the trapeze that you're holding onto. And there is a moment where you are flying through the air and you are not holding on to one and you are not holding on to the other. And it's the moment of the biggest fear. Like, I might fall down to the earth and literally die in this moment. But that is also the moment where all potential exists. Where if you can allow yourself to fly off of the one hold with full trust and excitement, even for what is to come, then as you grab on to the other trapeze, you are doing it with this open-hearted curiosity, as opposed to gripping on and resisting the change. And that is also an issue in the earth element that can happen when we resist change and we don't allow ourselves to be ungrounded enough to get to a new ground. Then all the physical challenges of stagnant earth come up and envelop us. Things like stomach aches. If you are someone that's prone to getting stomach aches, that clenching feeling, that fearfulness, clamping down, it's physically your body resisting the transformations that are coming, whether it's the transformation of the food into your physical body itself, or the transformation of, the winter into the spring, into the summer, whatever it is that you're resisting. If you resist, it will cause physical, mental, emotional, spiritual stagnation and increase the challenges in your life, even though you feel like you're holding on to what was, because what was so good, but what was. And that is going to change. And so I want to hear what you have to say, Blaine, about grounding, but I also want to encourage you to allow yourself that ungroundedness so that you can get to your new ground.
Yeah, I'm happy you said that, Lauren, because it's the seeds of change, right? Isn't that the whole metaphor? Like, if there wasn't wind, then the seeds wouldn't go anywhere, and then there wouldn't be new growth. And I'm coming from nature, so we don't want not change.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's necessary and also destabilizing, like you said. Yeah, so for breath work, I wasn't going to give a specific breath technique other than I think it's good to close your lips and breathe in and out through your nose, because often when we are feeling destabilized, then we might get more into that little bit of mouth breathing, which further is a little upsetting to the nervous system. It kind of starts the rock, the snowball down the hill of things happening to the body. But I think that either through habit or just, some unconscious patterns, people start mouth breathing a little bit when they're feeling ungrounded. And so if you can just, close the lips and breathe in and out through the nose, that is just an immediate, really calming way that you can, and just doing that, I mean, you have to be focusing on your breath, right? To be like, okay, I feel myself breathing in and out through the nose. I have reset it. I think people, if they listen to Energy Works, probably have a favorite breath work. Lauren, do you have anything to add about the breath? One of our favorite topics.
It is one of our favorite topics, and it really is the most powerful anchor to just come right back to yourself, which is why so many teachers teach it, and why it's been, in the lineages and traditions for centuries, because it is really the most accessible. So I would say yes. What Blaine said. Closing the mouth, focusing on the breath, always You can do James Nestor's perfect breath, which is 5.5 seconds in for 5.5, out for 5.5, is very grounding. And then the breath itself for the earth element, which I love, is the Ujjayi breath, which is the yogic breath, which is also the breath of self-love. So all of those things are really powerful. And if you want to learn that breath, you can go back to our we did a podcast on 5 elements. Each element had its own podcast, and in the earth element podcast there, we actually teach you how to do that breath, the Ujjayi breath. And that's also very grounding and centering and self-loving, which is one of the hallmarks of the earth element is loving of the self. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, the loving of the self. I mean, doing something special for yourself, getting cozy, a nice warm cup of tea, getting your favorite blanket, your favorite book, a bath, anything that you do that kind of fills your own cup. I think is really nice when you're intentional. I mean, it's nice all the time, but if you're like, whoa, I feel destabilized right now, it's a nice thing that you can do for yourself. Going out in nature, even if, getting out in the wind, going out for the walk, getting out in the snow, it's not like that you have to have a perfect weather day to get out in nature, but, get out by a tree, get out by some water, look towards the horizon and take some deep breaths is a really great way to connect with earth element. And Lauren, I'll hand it over to you before I get into a couple of food things. What are your favorite ways to ground?
Yeah, I love that you brought up, of course, getting out in nature. And I mean, it is the earth element. And so getting onto the earth itself, especially if you spend a lot of time in man-made structures, in buildings and, separated from the earth, or if you live in a city and you don't have the opportunity as much that to get onto the earth. We always talk about grounding. Many people do, about getting your bare feet on the bare earth, right? Connecting the meridians on the bottom of the foot, the kidney meridian, right to the earth itself, drawing up the vibration of the earth, the Schumann resonance, soaking in that, all of those things. And I want to add something to that, because getting your bare feet on the bare earth is, the simplest way to get grounded. But grounding is also to yourself, because you can be grounded or ungrounded. You can have your bare feet on the earth and still feel ungrounded in yourself. And you can be 30,000 feet in the air and feel very grounded. And so that idea of grounding is not just that you need to be connected to the earth with your bare feet. You need to be connected to yourself, to your inner, deepest sense of self. And a lot of times when we, talk about correcting polarity, we'll take a hand, palm down onto the top of the head, and then flip the back of the hand to the top of the head, and back and forth, and doing that a few times so that we correct our polarity, so that we can be grounded. But that doesn't mean that you have to then go walk out onto the earth. What that means is that you have shifted the magnetism of your own body into alignment with the magnetic fields of the earth, so that you are walking through it and able to stay with yourself and not just dissipate all of your energy or feel that I'm trying to think of other words. What happens when we feel ungrounded? We feel, buzzy. We feel distracted. We feel confused. We feel like we can't, get clear in our thoughts. All of those things. You can find that grounding no matter where you are. And so that technique, hand flipping back and forth on top of the head, is one way to do that. And Blaine's going to share some ways that you can find that grounding through what you actually put into your body that is going to become your physical body. So take it away.
Yeah. So I did a podcast recently on the 5 flavors, the flavor for each element, and the flavor for earth is sweet. Yay. I know. Yum. And And again, sweet, we don't mean, refined sugar, right? When we're talking about sweet, we're not talking about refined sugar. It's like when we talk about salty and water, we're not talking about the salt from the mines that you find in your salt shaker and you just dump salt on anything. And then that's not what we're talking about. Like the inherent nature of the food is sweet, but still yum. And a lot of it is what you would think for Earth, the root vegetables, the carrots and the sweet potatoes and the beets and the nature of these foods raw, but even more so if you roast them. And it really brings out the caramelization and the more sweet flavor. And then again, in the Chinese dietary therapy, that you don't want to be eating a lot of raw. You want at least like a little bit steamed or cooked or something like that, so it is more digestible and you can eke more nutrients out of the food. And so when we are, I feel like it's kind of like the comfort food stuff, like your soups and your stews and your root vegetables that are roasted and, almost like your fall kind of foods that you can eat at any time. I mean, even your squashes and zucchinis and all that sort of thing. If that's the season that you are in, are sweet and come out of the earth and can be cooked and roasted and all that sort of thing. That is the food that you want to be eating, that is very nourishing, very digestible, very comforting, and you do get that sweet flavor on your tongue from those foods. It's very yummy.
It sounds very yummy. And my head already jumped to, and so I want you to talk about if fruits are part of what you're saying, because I immediately thought of apples, but then of course I'm thinking, well, in the springtime, maybe early summer, late spring, we'll start to see some berries. And so I just wonder if those are also, I mean, obviously all food is from the earth. So, there's that. But I know you're talking very specifically. But when you said the sweet, I went right to fruit. So is that part of it or no?
I would say, I mean, not in the cooling kind of way, because we want more of these warming foods, and fruit is typically more of a cooling food. Mm-hmm. Not that, and the warming and cooling, again, it's the inherent nature of the food. It's not cooked versus not cooked. Like a cucumber is a very cooling food. And if you stir fry the cucumber, it is still a cooling food in the body. But I think if you did like your baked apple and that sort of thing, you would still get some of that, like that warm, especially like with cinnamon, and you would get some of that like earthy warmth to you that you seek.
Nice. Good. I like that.
Yeah, and so I guess my invitation in this podcast was that we can look at, I guess, be less rigid about when the Earth time is, because through this lens, anybody could be going through Earth time based on what's going on in their life or the weather or anything like that. And so this, I guess, permission to do the earth things for yourself whenever you need. It's not just a certain season. It's not a certain time of year. When it's time for you, it's time for you to take care of your earth element in that way. And it is probably spring when you're listening to this, depending on where you live.
I really love that perspective of centering Earth, because then when we look to the emotional components of that, it's really the overriding emotional arc for Earth is self-love. And so if we can center that, then everything that we do nourishes that and allows us to make all of the transitions that we make, whether they're daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, seasonally, life changes, all of that, if we're always leading with self-love, which then, if you love yourself deeply and truly, that love reverberates out into the world. The people around you feel that. They feel nourished just by your presence. And if you know earth people, those are the people that you want in your life. You want to hang out with the earth people because they are loving, they are generous of spirit, they are kind. And those are the attributes that we aspire to each having within ourselves, generous, loving, and kind towards ourselves first, because of course we can't bring that out to anyone else if we're internally mean to ourselves. It's very hard externally to be kind to other people. And so I love that idea of centering earth in all ways. And there is some theory that when five element theory started way back thousands of years, earth was in the center for all of these reasons, that nothing exists without the earth. None of the seasons exist, no food exists, we don't exist, like nothing exists. Five element theory doesn't exist, like nothing exists without earth. So of course it is in the center of everything, and that everything blooms from that. And there are other reasons that we won't get into on this podcast right now of why earth got moved out ever into the outside of the circle. And so bringing it back in and centering it, I think, is valuable and important for each of us individually and for the continuation of the planet, to center the earth, that we are caring for the earth, that we are keeping her clean and valuing every part of her expression, the garden of diversity that the earth has had for thousands of years, is a hallmark of the health of earth in the center, and that love piece. So I love that we bring that back there, and I hope that we could transition to a place where earth is in the center for everyone in every capacity, individually, planetarily, globally, so that we can continue for thousands and thousands and thousands of more years on this earth.
Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful way to close, Lauren. I think we all wish that.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us, everyone. If you'd love to we'd love it if you would pop a comment in or give us a rating. Let us know what you think. I'll say that I have received, I sent a newsletter I wrote one of the energy medicine yoga newsletters recently. And there's something about earth in there, and someone who I know from the Eden world sent me, I wouldn't say it was snarky, just kind of a funny thing about what I said about earth. And it was around this. And so, it might be a little paradigm shattering what we just did. I 100% acknowledge that. And if you're still here, you've listened to the end. And so thank you. And we'd love to hear your feedback and your comments and continue the discussion.